day 96 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by James Valliant. Hey, James, how's it going?
Hey, okay. How about you, Razi?
Good. You know, the things I watch before these shows, we watch it so you don't have to. Today we've been watching Al Jazeera.
One of
Uh,
my least favorite networks to dive into, or websites to dive into. My
yeah,
God,
this
the
is
heart of darkness.
this is the Qatari state-owned news channel that has in English an English version, and from what I've heard, it's different from the Arabic version, but the English version is bad enough.
Yeah.
Now, just a point about state-owned media, because we have that in the West, and it's bad in the West, but it's a different kind of bad. In the West, they have some sort of, at least they have to pretend to be accountable, whereas in a totalitarian regime, the regime decides everything. If you say something that they are not okay with, you are not going to be saying anything again, certainly not on the air. So,
Right. I mean, if you live in a monarchy that's based on Islam, they're going to tell you what to say and what you can say. And yeah, Al Jazeera, it means the peninsula, presumably a reference to the Arab Peninsula, or I don't know, maybe the Qatari Peninsula. But in any event, it means simply the peninsula. And they take a position that is pro Hamas, anti-Israel every time. Everyone knows this. For over 20, almost 20 years now, they've had an English language version. They aggressively came out after 9/11, almost 20 years ago, with an English language version of their propaganda. But in the show notes, one of the things we've been discussing on recent shows is how horrible the Western media is. The BBC, even Sky News, the New York Times, they uncritically report information straight from Hamas. They take an anti-Israel stance. And in the show notes, I hope that we can provide the link. Al Jazeera did an entire article on how the entire Western media is pro-Israel and biased against the poor people of Palestine and Gaza. So it tells you right there just how skewed over they are to lies every single time. It's this vicious Israeli assault on innocent civilians. They uncritically accept Hamas numbers every single time. Every single time they're against Israel. And you know something? I think that the most important thing takeaway from all of that is that we learn something about Muslim culture worldwide. They are a mainstream voice of Muslim culture. They speak for the majority of Muslims worldwide. And so I can't think of another culture on this planet that is so overt in their primitive mystic racism, in their hate talk. And so what we get from Al Jazeera is a thermometer, I think, of the entire Islamic culture, the entire Islamic world. And all the progressives and all our leftist folks here in the West, really, what they're allowing to happen are the most primitive kind of primordial racists to use their racist propaganda with full authority from the progressive left, mind you, in their
yeah, that's
justification of all that.
yeah, and that's an important thing here. So yeah, they're they're mainstream in the Arabic world, but they are uh, mainstream to an extent in the West. Certainly, they're, what they say is way more mainstream than anything we say on this channel, unfortunately. And we talked about the way, I think this was last week, the way the Palestinian propaganda machine works. And Al Jazeera plays in the West, and Al Jazeera plays an important piece of that puzzle because
Indeed.
it's if it's considered a reliable news source, then when it has something that has Israel's genocide in the title, which is something I found. By the way, we've talked about research for these shows, and sometimes it's easier than other times. You literally put into YouTube Al Jazeera, not anything about Israel and so on. The first thing that come up, the first one was war on Gaza. So this is how they report uh, on the war started by Hamas against Israel. They call it the war on Gaza. And then, they have experts on, and the experts explain Israel's crimes. And one of the experts I saw, I think this was in the first video that came up, was explaining how, the world isn't saying anything, even though they were all up in arms about labor violations during in Qatar during the World Cup. Of course, the world was not up in arms. The world is up in arms about Israel's self-defense war. It was not up in arms about Qatar. Qatar still hosted the World Cup as a dictatorship, that proudly violates people's rights in every way possible, not just not protecting the rights of people to not die while building the stadium. And just a quick point, yeah. Again, this is important to remember in the context of this is a Qatari government channel. So that the way they slip that in, look, everybody knows we're the good guys here in the dictatorship of Qatar. The bad guys are the Jews, and yeah, to
Oh,
remember that when this is considered a serious news source.
it's a call for, all of their genocide talk and all of their other talk is really a call for a genocide against Jews. The racist hatred, that just drips off of Al Jazeera in nearly every single one of their reports is apparent to anyone with an objective eye. But the thing I'd ask people to remember is that a government that are harboring Hamas leaders right now are the folks that are really the final editorial call judgment at Al Jazeera. So bear that in mind. These people protect the perpetrators of October 7th, and this is their official voice. So if you want to think about it that way, Al Jazeera is the official voice of people who are harboring and protecting the perpetrators of October 7th. That's the way to look at it. And a recent clip, just a very, very recent clip, I wonder if Daniel has it. It ties in so perfectly to what we were talking about yesterday and the anti-concept escalation. It shows how, one, the pusillanimous nature of the West's response, but how Al Jazeera uses this anti-concept of escalation. I wonder if we could play that, Daniel.
Given the Red Sea patrols, we knew in advance of those being set up that the Iranian defense minister said very clearly, nobody can make a move in a region where we have predominance. The United States knew that, set it up anyway. Is that not being seen as a provocation? If you know that Iran sees that as a provocation, you take the action anyway.
Well, that's certainly turning things on their upside down, isn't it? Wouldn't you consider provocation launching ballistic missiles and drones at commercial? Wait, let me finish. Wouldn't that be considered provocation? Targeting innocent merchant shipping and innocent merchant sailors? That's a provocation. What we're doing, what Prosperity Garden is all about, you can go on web, you can look at it. It's a defensive posture. It's a coalition of the willing of maritime nations coming together to try to protect international shipping that affects the global economy.
Escalation, because in turn what has happened is, so you're denying then that there has been an escalation since the Red Sea patrol?
I totally disagree with the premise of your question. It wasn't the United States who decided to attack commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The Houthis did that. And who?
Okay. Well, I mean, right there. First, she's trapping him in the illogic, the pusillanimous, cowardly logic of the West that says we don't want escalation. And she's using that anti-concept against the Biden administration that has put fear of escalation as their number one policy goal. So we don't want to escalate this. That's our number one fear. So we don't want to provoke this. So the lady from Al Jazeera, mind you, says, well, since Iran says they're going to protect the Houthis, isn't this defensive move by Western nations to protect international shipping a provocation? So Iran can say we can shut off Western shipping. The Houthis can say we can shut off Western shipping. That's not escalation. That's not provocation. That, in fact, any defensive move on the part of the United States to protect international shipping, that's the provocation that would cause escalation. Now, mind you, if the administration hadn't already trapped itself with the use of this anti-concept, we don't want escalation, she wouldn't have been able to use this against them. So you can see the pusillanimous sort of conceptual lack of clarity on the part of the Biden administration to go keep their head in the sand like an ostrich being used against them by Al Jazeera. But consider how far gone you have to be this wacky lady from Al Jazeera. International shipping gets attacked. Because Iran says we're sending a ship there to help the Houthis. Anything that the United States or its allies does to protect international shipping there is the provocation. In other words, Al Jazeera's policy is Israel and the United States just have to suck it up when we attack international shipping, when we attack Israel, the destruction of Israel. You guys have to be silent to, in effect. You guys have to be silent to Iranian aggression all over the region. And if you're not, then Al Jazeera's got a problem with you. That shows you just how evil and dishonest Al Jazeera is.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wondered when I saw that clip. Sorry if this is me being racist, but if she was a DEI, a Qatari style DEI hire, although she is very good at her job, a job that is despicable to begin with. My first problem with that clip was way before she opened her mouth, which is, what is she doing there? Why is she there? That's the White House, the government needs to answer to journalists and journalists of all different types of media organizations, left wing, right wing, whatever. But they don't have to answer to the state-owned media entities of governments that should be considered at the very least hostile, if not full-on enemies. But of course, Qatar is considered a friend, even though they abuse their own people and sponsor terrorism against America's true allies. And then they're as a result, of course, you're going to accept their media organization as just another legitimate journalist.
At least Israel has kicked these liars and October 7th sympathizers to the curb. The United States should do the same. But the United States government in its press conferences includes Al Jazeera there, even though Al Jazeera is actively promoting the destruction of Israel. They permit and supports lies. I mean, the hospital incident that we've been talking about, they did nothing but lie through that entire incident. And despite the twisted logic about escalation that Kirby is complaining about, although they set themselves up, as I said, for this, despite that twisted logic, you're absolutely right. Why is Al Jazeera even allowed into press conferences at any United States government press conference? These people are racist. They are the voice of the racist, mystic, violent hatred that gives us October 7th. These are sympathizers. They aid and abet. This is like allowing Tokyo Rose into a press conference during World War II.
So, by the way, I'm not 100% sure Israel did actually kick them out, did they? They were talking about it. I think they may have changed their mind.
Oh, you're kidding.
I'm not 100% sure. I did see something. I
was so delighted to see the report that they were kicking him to the curb. I didn't follow up. Have they let him back in?
I think they never kicked them out. I'm not 100% sure. Hopefully somebody in the chat knows. I do remember seeing recently something from Al Jazeera from occupied East Jerusalem, which is, of course, Israel, a part of Israel. So,
Israel.
yeah. So, but yeah, you kind of touched on the point that, ideas come before action. You act based on the ideas you believe to be true. And so there's definitely a division of labor here where people like Al Jazeera supply. They're not the ultimate, I think, intellectuals there, but they're the popularizers of these ideas, and they disseminate them. And then when you get to the point of the actual action that needs to be taken, whether it's the terrorists on October 7th, whether it's the people marching in support of the terrorists in our Western cities. So they know that this is also why they have, this is why they have an English language channel, because the terrorists in the Middle East are not going to watch it. They're going to take this kind of action. But actually, I think in Qatar, there was a realization that the best way for them to win this war is through the West's enemy within, through those people in the West who will side with anybody who is against the West, particularly with those who want to cause harm, and particularly with those who want to kill Jews. James, do you want to see the clip that I had prepared? Now, this is just a few seconds from a clip, but Daniel, maybe you can share, put the link in the description so people can watch the whole thing if they want.
I've taken my stomach medicine this morning, so I think I can probably survive.
It is a dangerous precedent, isn't it, to say that we can attack you wherever you are in the world without giving any proof and without any mandate via the UN or any other official body. It's a dangerous Pandora's box to open.
Absolutely. It violates the sovereignty of any country where Israel uses force against suspected terrorists. It's not a new phenomenon. I mean, of course, Israel has been assassinating its perceived enemies for many, many decades. I mean, if you go back to the Munich Olympics attack in 1972, in successive years, Israel hunted down and murdered those responsible, it thought, for those
All right.
attacks. In the
Yeah,
process, of course,
I think that's enough. That's enough of this person. Yeah, that's
More
so
than enough.
so just to see clearly Al Jazeera's place in within that propaganda machine. This is the UN rights rapporteur Ben Sol. So this is somebody. This is the UN going to their favorite network, the network of the totalitarian Qatari regime, talking about Israel. First of all, being given this softball question, which shouldn't be, this is something that if you are actually on the side of rights, you would be outraged by this question of Israel assassinating people without any proof. This was in reference, by the way, to the killing of al-Aruri in Lebanon. Without any proof, Hamas filmed themselves. This is the deputy head of Hamas. There is no more proof that you can have for any crime than Israel had for this. And of course, the first thing that this UN guy says is absolutely, and then goes on to say Israel murdered. That was the word he used.
God,
Murdered.
he used the word
terrorist,
murder.
the terrorist responsible for the Munich Olympics terrorist attack.
Vicious, serial killing, racist murderer was not murdered. He was properly executed. I would point out to him that the United Nations did not authorize Mr. Obama in his drone strikes. There are many times when nations act outside of the United Nations in their own self-defense, and anyone who is harboring Hamas leaders is acting aggressively against, that's an act of aggression against Israel. Lebanon, Turkey, Qatar, all of them that are harboring Hamas leaders are actively aggressive against Israel. They are aiding and abetting people who plan and organize October 7th. They are guilty of things like October 7th. We would, in no other legal context, if I supplied you with the gun and you went off and did the murder and I knew you were going to do a murder with it, I am a principal to your crime. Basic criminal law. Lebanon is an aggressor against Israel. Qatar is an aggressor against Israel. So long as they harbor these people who helped organize October 7th, they have the blood of October 7th right on their hands in a direct way. They are protecting the killers of October 7th. So you're getting it all wrong. And first of all, the United Nations, which we all already know, hates Israel and wants to wipe Israel off the map, cannot be the thing that stops Israel from taking reasonable actions in its own self-defense. This is so morally twisted. This is so morally bankrupt. And again, when it's that morally bankrupt, when someone is saying, in effect, Israel, you have to die, which is what these people are saying, they are the advocates of Jewish genocide. These are the racists. These are the bigots. These are the, in fact, as I say, Al Jazeera in general, probably the most disturbing aspect of Al Jazeera is that they reflect, even in their English language version, because especially in their English language version, because you got to believe that's the one that's tailored for Western opinion. And if that's the nice version, I mean, I don't read a lick of Arabic. I don't understand a lick of Arabic, so I can't understand it. But if this is the nice pro-Western version, then that really tells you what is at the heart of Islamic culture around the world today. This tells you what mainstream Muslim opinion is. Mainstream Muslim opinion is murderous hatred of Jews is built in to mainstream Muslim culture today. And the left in the West totally gives it aid, comfort, and protection. They are all concerned about all kinds of, if you don't use the right pronouns, we can fire you, da, 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 da. But when you've got people actually justifying racist hatred against Jews overtly, the left has got their back completely. Talk about, a world, you use their pseudo concept, systemic racism. The Muslim world is the most systemically, overtly at least, out loud at least, proudly at least, the most overtly systemically racist culture on earth today. On earth today. And rather than open their mouths in any kind of criticism of the culture, of the dominant culture in the Muslim world today, they have got their back protecting them. And that's what the left does. That's the real evil behind letting Al Jazeera into these press conferences. What we're doing is we're sanctioning, in effect, the worst kind of defenses of October 7th and violence. We're sanctioning it, in effect, by letting Al Jazeera ask questions at all in those press conferences. Absolutely.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Jonathan, for your super chats. The UN guy, by the way, I didn't see him make any comment about whether the October 7th attack was approved by the UN Security Council, but you would think it would be more likely to be approved by the UN than any
Right.
act of self-defense by Israel.
And would that make it justifiable because it's okay under, say the General Assembly voted and the vote, okay, yeah, absolutely, October 7th's cool. We love it. And keep the rockets firing. Hezbollah and Hamas can fire whatever rockets they want into Israel. Keep them. The Houthis can keep firing stuff over at Israel, even though most of it, all of it's been stopped so far. But no, would that make it okay? Would the magical pixie dust of the UN somehow make this awful aggression, the horrific atrocities of October 7th, legally justifiable? No, they would not.
Now, we talked about this when we talked about the way the Palestinian propaganda machine operates, but it's important to repeat here that this specifically that kind of clip where you have an interview with an expert from the UN. I mentioned that Owen Jones had this video talking about genocide and said something to the effect of, look, don't take it from me, take it from an expert, take it from a UN expert. So you have a UN expert talking at a major respected, unfortunately, media organization, and the pieces of this puzzle, this is what, when you look at the information that the pro-Palestinian anti-Israel crowd shares, it is information from these propaganda organizations, and it's important to always, if somebody tells you here, look, I heard it on Al Jazeera, know that it is worth questioning, to say the very least, if not completely dismissing, even if it might be, I'm sure they report some things that are fact, but they report it as part of a propaganda effort.
Right. No, it'll all be twisted around a giant lie. No, it's going to be distorted if you're going to Al Jazeera. You only go to Al Jazeera if you're interested in what the evil mainstream Muslim opinion on things like October 7th in Israel is, because that's all it's good for, is finding out what Hitler's side of World War II is about, and that's the only real purpose, is intelligence gathering, in effect, from the enemy. And like you say, what the hell is Al Jazeera doing there at U.S. government press conferences? But then again, I might ask the question: what the hell is the United States doing, funding the United Nations to the tune of billions? But
and pretending that countries like Qatar are allies. Thank you, Bob Words, for the super chat. He says, historian Neil Ferguson once called the left useful idiots to Islamicism. Prescient, huh? Yeah. Look, by the way, the useful idiots comment was originally, was it Lenin who said it about?
yes,
was it Lenin? It was Lenin, right?
I think it was Lenin who said that about all the folks in the West who were
about their allies.
Yes,
their allies in the West, about leftists in the West. And somebody said here, Al Jazeera is like current day Goebbels propaganda. Yeah, I was also thinking this when I saw a video where Al Jazeera talks about Israel's genocide and puts it in the title as if it's a thing. You don't need to, we all know it's a genocide, so we'll just put it in the title and we'll say what it is we're talking about. And that's definitely the approach with certain things like the use of the word genocide in Israel's war, which again, as I've said, I oppose the extent to which they go to prevent civilian casualties in Gaza. I mean, I wouldn't try to prevent it at all, but I certainly would like it to be done much less. But that is something they know. Again, they know all about the leaders of this, the intellectual leaders, the people in Al Jazeera. They are not like the from the mountains to the sea woman who didn't know what she was talking about. They know what they're talking about. They know what they're talking about. They're dishonest. It's purposeful deceit of their audience.
Yes, And I love the comment. It is. It's very much like having Joseph Goebbels, having his version, his side of things during World War II, or Tokyo Rose having, her commentary at the end of each news segment, or relating what they say. Oh, it was reported today in Aljazeera. Read that as Joseph Goebbels today in defending the Nazi regime said, : it's the same.
So last Thursday was it? I interviewed Eitan Fischberger about the UNRWA teachers Telegram group that he went into, and today UN Watch released a report on it. It's very interesting. I recommend reading it. I also recommend watching the show we're going to do about it, the reality show which follows this show, titled "The Success of the Palestinian Education System."
Well,
Because it is a success. And by the way, I kind of stole.
What a brave reporter. I urge everyone who hasn't seen that interview to go check it out. What we've been saying about the UN and UNRWA is absolutely correct. And you're going to get some firsthand information from an outstanding interview that was done. So I definitely urge people to go check out that interview.
Yeah, I kind of stole that title from a tweet of his where somebody said that UNRWA is ineffective, and he said, no, it's the most effective organization
Quite
they have.
effective.
Yeah, and October 7th was the success of the Palestinian education system. It was, those kids who were raised in UNRWA schools doing what they were taught should be their goal in life. And so that
Die
is.
if necessary in order to martyr yourself, to kill Jews and wipe Israel off the map. And when they're done, it's the other Western countries we're coming for. That's what these kids are trained from the earliest ages, to hate Jews, murderously hate Jews, to think martyrdom is a noble thing in that cause. That's exactly what they're taught in the educational materials. You can read it for yourself.
And yeah, we'll post a link to that report on the next show, on the reality show. Tomorrow, in case you think some of our titles at least are not controversial enough, tomorrow's episode of the Daily Objective is titled "Palestinian Civilians Are Responsible for October 7th." But as we, I think, have done well with our most controversial titles and our less controversial titles, we back it up. We will talk about it for 30 minutes and we will explain why it is that Palestinian civilians are responsible for October 7th. I hope you join us for that episode tomorrow at the same time, and stay tuned. In 2 minutes, the reality show starts, and we will be talking about that report and how UNRWA teaches the next generation of terrorists. Thank you, James. We'll see you back here tomorrow.